name is Albert Walter Werk. That's W-E-R-K. It's not W-O-R-K. I was in the Army Air Force. I was a armor ball turret gunner is what my position was. B-24s, then we switched to B-17s. That's out of England. I'm 91 now, I'll be 92 in another month. In September, I'll be 92. I was born in Los Angeles, that's where if you want to know that. But I grew up in Oakland and went to the Oakland schools. Fremont High School was my high school I left. In high school when they bombed Pearl Harbor. And of course, the nation was all in an uproar when that happened. And I think I was 17 at that time, or 16. So anyway, I guess that's where I started I wanted to go in the Air Force. I went into the service when I was 18. The war was already on. Anyway, the war was going. We went down, our age groups were being drafted. So I went and joined the Army Air Force. And you had to go down and make a special arrangement at that time. And I was sent over to the peninsula and had to take a 6-hour test to get into the Air Force. And I did. I wanted to fly. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know which, I went through the whole process of becoming a pilot. I enlisted. Because I wanted to go to the Air Force, and that wasn't a drafted deal. I went over and had to take a test. It was an all-day test. It was 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, just to get into the Air Force. I mean, that's what, at that time. And you pass that, then they accepted you, and I was sent to Texas for a bomb group. Not for the bomb group, but it was for the training, basic training. Basic training was just getting yourself physically in shape, making sure you're ready to go. And then we were sent to the very last minute there. All of a sudden they threw a curve in, and they eliminated over half of us from some minor little point that we missed along the way there. And I didn't know about it. Later on, they come and explain to us that they had too many pilots, too many things going, and so they cut a bunch of us off and just eliminated over half of the group that was in there. But I went on and became a B-17 or B-24 armor gunner, and I was in the ball turret. I trained on those, and then later on we switched over to the B-17 as that was the newest plane and more effective bomber. Across it, I flew all over the United States at that time for training. We flew over the Atlantic to stopping at Iceland, and then on into England, where we were based. Most of the bomb groups were on the east side of England, and we were about 80 miles north of London, the bomb group I was with. Each bomb group had four sections to it. It had 48 planes. When we flew as a bomb group, each group only produced 12 planes up there, so we had 36 planes in the bomb group when we visited the continent in Germany, and that sometimes was a little exciting. Going to Germany was usually you had to be careful, because when we flew, one bomber was over another bomber just within striking distance. If you hit an air pocket, we came close a couple of times. But we flew in a tight formation, but that was basically real tight when we were going in for bombing. But flying over, we were pretty close together. And we had a couple of accidents, but that way within the groups. We had a lot of fun on our way over. We stopped at Iceland. I always thought that was a great place. You see in Norway and Iceland and the North Atlantic. But anyway, we ended up in Wales in England. And when we were there, they surprised us by taking us off of our B-24 and shipping us across England to a B-17 bomb group. they found that the B-17s were being more effective. So even though we were trained for that one and flew one over, they put us in the B-17s. And then we had to be retrained in that. Then after that, when they were ready to put us into the war was going on. They had already started the invasion into France. So that group was in there and just breaking into the continent. So when we started in, our first bomb runs, they would take three of the 4 groups there and put them in as a bomb force. So we had 36 planes. We were one group. I don't know how many groups actually there were, but there was quite a number. So, but they all had different missions. So we'd go up and form a formation on a bomb run, and we took off one at a time and had to get together as a 36 bomb group, a training group, to train us on the bomber. And that's where I went into several different places for that. And I started off to be a pilot, and then I didn't make that. But anyway, I ended up as a ball turret gunner. Yeah, underneath the plane, it was the ball of the plane. And I liked it. You climbed in that ball, and of course on the B-24, you did 2 things. You had to operate inside the plane. You had to drop the ball and pull it up. In the B-17, it was only one, you just climbed in. It was a one setup. But you got in there, you were in a ball. I couldn't move around because there was no movement in there. But I had twin machine guns. But I enjoyed the ball. I was underneath the plane, and I had a view of everything down below us. I guess I had one of the better views of the lower part of it. But once we got all set up as a bomb group, and then we're assigned to we flew across the Atlantic to England. To Wales is where we landed. And then they put us on the train and sent us to the B-17 outfit, which we weren't trained for. So we had to stop and retrain for B-17. And then they assigned us to a bomb group, which we did. The bomb group had four squadrons of 12 each of the B-17s. We had 48 planes. Plus they had a couple of spares for when they got banged up. So then from that group, when we flew, we only flew 12 planes each. We had four. We were divided up into 4 groups. Each group was set for themselves, but they only flew 3 of them at a time. We had 36 bombers at a time. But even though there was 48 on the base, when we took off, the basic part of the crew, the pilot and so forth, were specially told where we're going and where to fly. And the reason for it was the Germans had already invaded England, the spies, and they were getting all this information where you're going, and if they get whatever information they got, they transferred over back to Germany. So when we got over into France, our group, they knew exactly what altitude to fly at. The Germans had all these anti-aircraft guns, and the idea was try to fly out of the range of the guns. So that's what the training was about. What they briefed the crew about. So when we flew in, we were supposedly in a different range than the anti-aircraft guns the Germans had set up. We had our own spy groups over there, knowing what they were going to do. Because if the guns weren't set up right, then the explosions were over your head or underneath you. Supposedly they missed you. And in basic, it was pretty good. The Germans had a lot of different ways of trying to adjust those anti-aircraft guns. But of course, the fighter planes were the other big part of it, and then that's what you had to That's what they were all prepared for, because they were a little different. You didn't know when they were coming and how were they going to hit you. Once you got over near the base of the bombing, where you're going to bomb, you went into the altitude that they had to set up, and we spread out as a bomb group. We had our 36 planes, so we spread out so we wouldn't drop the bombs on each other. So you had a big target. The target may not have been as big as the bomb group spread out, but when we dropped the bombs, we blew up a large area. And they hit the target, well, they hit the target and everything alongside of it, wiping it out. I was only on 9 missions, because one of the come back on the takeoff, the commander of the base, nobody ever could figure out why. He decided he's going to have a flight formation, but he only took the basic crew. We had a 10-man crew, and he only took 5 each. And nobody could figure out what was that about. So he took that bomb group up, and for training, he thought he was doing something special, I guess. But when he was out, England had a famous fog. And this fog would roll in, and it'd roll in down to the ground up to about 1,500, 1,700 feet. So the whole thing was covered. You couldn't see. Coming back, you couldn't see anything. So that's what happened. They had only a 5-man crew, and the bomb group came back, and of course they didn't have the full crew on there. Everybody had a place to watch. So in coming in, and then of course this is a new crew, and they'd never been in that situation. So, in flying in, the ground crew would fire a red flare up, letting them know where to land, or when to land. So when our crew came in, they said that they didn't fire that flare. So they all got excited because they didn't fire the flare. So they climbed back up into the fog. And in doing so, amongst them, one of them pulled the wheels up, and the other, whatever, all they did. So when they circled around, they got another command to land in the bomb group. And of course, they only had half the crew in there. They come down, and somebody forgot to pull the wheels, drop the wheels again. The pilot thought the wheels were down. He didn't know they pulled them up. Everybody had a different command to do, and the pilot was flying, and the co-pilot. So that was between a couple other guys. So they didn't pull the wheels. They pulled the wheels up and didn't drop them. So when they landed, they made a beautiful landing, and the pilot thought everything was here. They were just gliding down that runway, and all of a sudden the propeller started to crackle. Hit the ground, and they all knew they were in trouble. And so they tore up that bomber, and as a result, they broke up the crew instead of just taking care of the problem. So we were all put on different crews. I was kept in the deal because I was a specialty position of the ball turret and being the armor gunner. And so we flew out whenever there was something, somebody couldn't make it, they were sick or whatever the problem was. So I flew with a crew. Each time it would be a different crew, which wasn't fun. Because you fly with crews you don't know who's doing what. So anyway, that's what I did. In one of the, in one of the crews, you always had flak holes in it from the anti-aircraft guns. The Germans had anti-aircraft guns all from France all the way into Germany, because of course, they had invaded France. They had occupied France at that time and were being driven out. So the anti-aircraft guns were pretty effective. But the crews would change altitude each time, and they tried to keep it quiet just in there, because they didn't know who they were, but apparently there's always somebody in there in that Air Force that was a German spy. and they were lucky to catch one. And so they knew they would let them know what altitude we were coming in at. So that's what the idea was, to try to keep it quiet with the crew. And when we flew in, we'd try to fly at an altitude that they didn't know. So the anti-aircraft guns would go either over our head or explode below us. But we always got anti-aircraft. We got flak holes. The one time coming back, a ground crews, what they would do when you come back, they take the plane you're on, and when they were going over for repairs, they count the flak holes in your plane, or the bullet holes, whichever was, or both. And at one time, we had 154 flak holes in that plane. 10 guys were on the board. That plane, no one was touched. Yet we had 154 holes. I say, going into Germany was also another deal. It went in, we started out as a tight formation for the fighters, trying to keep them out. And then they changed the altitudes for the anti-aircraft fire. And we'd going into the target, drop the bombs if he wasn't in that fog. And if they're in the fog, they went by their charts, hoping that they hit the target. So you had all these, each plane had whatever load that they had called for that day. They had different sized bombs that each plane carried. I mean, they all carried the same thing, but I mean, they were different sizes on the plane when they dropped them. Did the damage, they usually, even if they missed the exact target, they would tear up everything around it. So they did a lot of damage. After you drop your bombs, then they would group together again as a formation, as a fighter formation, and everybody grouped, pulled up their planes tight, because each plane had 10 guns on it. So the fighters that would attack, they knew that they were running into a crossfire. No matter which way they came in, there was a bunch of guns that they had run into. There's only one time I felt I got one by itself. But anyway, we were coming back from this one bomb run, and this fighter dove through us. The Germans did that for some reason. I never could figure it out, because invariably they get hit and exploded. But this guy drove in, but we were in the lower part of the bomb group, and outside, and there's no bombers alongside of us. I mean, where it was visible. This guy drove in, and I guess he saw us as a target as he come through, because of the way we were located. But anyway, we got him, and I always felt I was the one that got him. I had my gun set up, and I watched him come in. So before he could come into us, our plane, I laid out a whole blanket of fire from the 2 machine guns. So he had to fly through them. And I always felt that I'm the one that got him as far as here, because after he went by me, he went on down, and all of a sudden the wings exploded off, and he was in trouble. So I always felt it was my bullets that got him. So that was another story. Coming of Germany, it was a real, between the ground forces driving in and tearing them up, and us going in and bombing the inward cities. So they were damaging all their infrastructure there, so they didn't have the power to supply their troops, eliminating all that. We tore up their Air Force and whatever other facilities we had. We hit different targets. Yeah, I had 9 missions. We supposed to be, we were designed for was 25, and some of them even went to 30. Being that our crew screwed up that one, at least according to the commander, and that wasn't a screw up. It wasn't their fault, and so they broke us up. Well, anyway, after the war, we had 2 or 3 different types of meetings across the United States where we flew over and got together as a group. So this one time, when that we're into the group in the United States, the commander of the bomb group that we were in at the time, he showed up. And he stopped and he apologized for what he did. It was a mistake on his part. And we all paid for it. I don't know if they broke him or what they did to him, but anyway, that was his mistake, and he had to live with it. So, well, after the war, coming back from Europe, we flew back. And we went on the East Coast, and the war wasn't ended in the Asian countries. Japan was still fighting, but Germany had finally threw in the towel. And when that happened, they closed the base on us. And I remember I was quite upset with that because I had my pass to go into London. And boy, the celebration they had was quite a celebration. So anyway, they locked us in and they took our bomb group and flew us back over to the United States and down to France, and then held us there because they were going to send us out in the Pacific if they had to. So we were set up as a reserve bomb group. And so all we did was sit there, and they gave us jobs to do, waiting to see if they needed us. But fortunately, the Japanese eventually gave up, and that war came to an end, so we didn't go. And so after that, they kept us for a little while, and I think it was in December that they called us up and say, well, you can go home. Oh, the atom bomb? We was wondering how come they didn't drop it away before, why they fooled around with that thing. They knew what it was. And so I was upset that they didn't use it well, I thought they should have used it. I thought they should have had a half a dozen of them by the time they dropped that one. But they dropped the one, and that I guess did a pretty good job on waking them up. Of course, I guess they ran into a lot in China, but anyway, there was the atom bombs they knew that was coming, and they weren't going to avoid it, so that's when finally Japan threw in the towel. But they went another, 4 months or 5 months after the Germans quit. I think the Germans quit in May, and they didn't quit until, I think it was December. So when that happened, of course, the whole world was celebrating. And that was the end of the war.
Is there anything?
Well, as far as saying anything, I thought they did a good job. But when we changed planes, that was a upset because that threw us behind while we retrained for a new plane. Basically, what they did was good. They knew what they were doing as an overall. They had the continent to fight, because the Germans are all over France. They were already here. In fact, they were getting ready to invade England, and they had set their troops up and had all the landings, and were starting off there again. But the Americans had brought in it was a cruiser, I think it was, they had out there, and which just damaged them to beat the heck when they were trying to start off come and invade England. And they did a good job on them. Anyway, they made the attempt and to get over to England, and that was another part of the story that they hear. But well, I don't know just what else other than England defending itself and did a good job.